Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Sheila Cherry and I'm a reporter with the Bureau of National Affairs and president of the National Press Club. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience today, as well as those of you watching on C-SPAN or listening to this program on National Public Radio. Please hold your applause during the speech so that we have time for as many questions as possible. And for our broadcast audience, I'd like to explain that if you hear applause, it may be from the guests and members of the general public who also attend our luncheons, and not necessarily from the working press. This video archive of today's luncheon is provided by Connect Live and is available to members only through the National Press Club website at www.press.org. For more information about joining the Press Club, please contact us at 202-662-7511. Press Club members can also access transcripts of our luncheons at our website, and non-members may purchase transcripts, audio and videotapes by calling 1-888-343-1940. Before introducing our head table, I would like to remind our members of some upcoming speakers. On Monday, October 18th, Senators George Allen of Virginia, who is chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and Senator John Corzine of New Jersey, the chair of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, will discuss the upcoming senatorial elections. And on Friday, October 22nd, Congressman Tom Reynolds of New York, chair of the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, and Congressman Bob Matsui from California, chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, will be here to discuss the upcoming congressional elections. On Thursday, October 28th, George Soros, philanthropist, will be here as our guest. If you have any questions for our speaker, I would like to invite you at this time to write them on the cards provided at your table and pass them up to me, and I will ask, I promise, as many as time permits. And now for our head table. I'd like to ask each of our head table guests to stand briefly as their names are called. Nicole Duran, reporter for Roll Call. Laura Nassau, Career de la Sera. Mary Lou Donahue, producer and editor of Artistically Speaking. Lori Nitschke, Washington correspondent for the Omaha World Herald. Austin Kiplinger, chairman of the board of the Kiplinger Washington Editors, a World War II veteran of the U.S. Navy, and a member of the National Press Club's Golden Owls. Sorry, Mr. Kiplinger, I had to break my own rule on that one. Rear Admiral Pierce Johnson, U.S. Naval Reserve retired, and president and CEO of the U.S. Navy Memorial Foundation. Clayton Boyce, former president of the National Press Club and vice chairman of the National Press Club Speakers Committee. Okay, I broke it, I'm sorry. We're going to skip, I know, bad hostess. Skipping over our speaker momentarily, Catherine Skiba, Washington correspondent for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and the member of the Speakers Committee who arranged today's luncheon. Thank you, Catherine. Captain Ralph Gambone, officer in charge and the leader of the U.S. Navy Band. Anna Iannuzzo of ANZA, the Italian news agency. John Cosgrove, former president of the National Press Club, a World War II veteran of the U.S. Navy, and another member of the Golden Owls. And Mark Wino, reporter of Dow Jones Corporate Filings Alert. Thank you very much. What a stellar head table, isn't it? Let's give them another round of applause. Well, we are particularly delighted to have with us as our guest today a man who has made us angry, he's made us laugh, he's made us cry, and he has made us dream for more than half a century. Perhaps you remember Ernest Borgnine as the brutal sergeant, Fatso Judson, in the film From Here to Eternity. Or the goon who underestimated Spencer Tracy in Bad Day at Black Rock. Or the mild-mannered, shy butcher Marty Paletti in Marty, the film that earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1955. Or perhaps, like legions of baby boomers, you first came to know his talents, like myself, first came to know his talents during the 1960s when he portrayed the long-suffering skipper, Lieutenant Commander Quentin McHale, in the popular television sitcom McHale's Navy. Today, his staggering number of outstanding film roles has made him something of an icon in the motion picture community. His remarkable story begins in Hamden, Connecticut, outside of New Haven, where he was born to Italian immigrants Charles and Anna Borgnine. The couple left their small northern town of Carpi in Italy at the turn of the last century. And after his high school graduation, Mr. Borgnine entered the real United States Navy, and he served during World War II. He started out at the bottom, rose through the ranks while being assigned to destroyers, and left the service after 10 years as a gunner's mate first class. When he returned home from the service in 1945, he was said to be at a loss about a career, so he took a few factory jobs. One day, out of the blue, his mother looked at her burly, gap-toothed son and suggested that, in light of his forceful personality, he might try acting. And a career was born, but not before he paid his dues. Mr. Borgnine enrolled in the Randall School of Dramatic Arts in Hartford, Connecticut, and broke into the professional ranks in the noted Barter Theater in Abingdon, Virginia. While at the Barter Theater, he acted as a jack of all trades, driving a truck, painting scenery, doing whatever was needed so that the show could go on. He made his Broadway debut in 1949 and 2 years later moved to Los Angeles, where his big break was From Here to Eternity. His prolific career has included appearances in more than 100 feature films, and among his reported favorites is The Catered Affair with Bette Davis. He has dazzled audiences portraying fictional characters as well as real people, from J. Edgar Hoover to Vince Lombardi. In his early days in New York, he did more than 200 live performances, including such masterworks as GE Theater and Philco Playhouse. More recently, you may have caught him on CBS's JAG or Walker, Texas Ranger. Or maybe you've heard his voice in such projects as the hit children's TV series, All Dogs Go to Heaven 2. He earned an Emmy nomination for that work. At age 87, he's still going strong, as well he should. Earlier this year, he guest starred in a Hallmark Channel Western called Trail of Hope Rose, in which he not only rode horseback, he drove a team of horses. And next month, he's set to appear in a feature film, Crime Busters, which is being shot in Florida. When he's not in front of the camera, you might find him fishing, or lending a hand to the cosmetic empire run by his glamorous wife, Tova, or giving his time to charity. He has been saluted for his support of the Navy Memorial Fund with the Foundation's Lone Sailor Award, an honor he shares with our esteemed NPC member, Austin Campolita. He is also the honorary flight leader for the Navy's flight demonstration team, the Blue Angels. And he is proud to have been honored with the 33rd degree of the Masonic Order, and more recently, their Order of the Grand Cross. Busy? Never busy enough, he tells us. This is why we are delighted and honored that he made time for us to share the story of his remarkable life and career, a story he has entitled Only in America. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great, great pleasure to present to the National Press Club the esteemed actor Ernest Borgnine.
Very much. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I stand here quivering. I really do. I feel like I'm just ready to make my entrance onto the stage. And this is exactly what it's like to address you lovely people of the press club and my few friends here that I have. I mean, my closest friends, like Captain Squicciarini and his wife, and Admiral Johnson, the CEO of the Navy Memorial, my other dear friend, whom I have the great pleasure of working with this coming Saturday, as I did a couple of years ago, Captain Gambone from the U.S. Navy Band. I have never in my life enjoyed anything so much. The old ham comes out, you know. But you're told just about everything there is to say. Somebody asked me, she said, she asked me today, she said, how did you end up with the name Ernest Borgnine? Well, I'll tell you, my mother told me that she was on a Greek kick just before I was born. And she was enamored of Hermes, the winged god, Mercury. And so when the doctor asked her, what do you want to name your boy? She said, Hermes, which means Hermes in Italian. Hermes. So he put two and two together and he put down E-R-M-E-S, Hermes. My father was on a 7-day drunk because I saved him from going to World War I. He had a boy, he had to take care of him. So he was very patriotic and named me after some 7-day wonder British general called, what the devil was the name of that? Ephraim. I've forgotten the middle name. And there I was, Ernest Borgnine. The name actually was Borgnino, B-O-R-G-N-I-N-O. But I had a couple of high society aunts who used to go to these wonderful governor's balls and all that sort of stuff. And they came home rather despondent one day and said, we want to change our name a little bit. And the old folks said, well, what do you want to change? We said, we want to, instead of the O in the end, because everybody says, oh, you're Italian. So we want to put something else. Well, what do you want to put? They said, we want to make it an E, Borgnine. And so they said, go ahead, you know. And so they changed it to Borgnine. Now everybody said, oh, you're French. So here I was with the moniker Ernest Borgnine. And one day I had a little time to spend before going in for divorce proceedings. And I said to my lawyer, would you mind very much if we found somebody where I could change my name to just plain Ernest? He said, we got time. I said, okay, let's go. And the judge looked at me and he looked at the name. He said, you want to change it to Ernest? I said, about time. So here I am, Ernest Borgnine. Not French, but American. And very happy to be. I spent 10 years in the service. I was what they call a depression sailor. There was a Great Depression in 1935 when I finished high school. My mother wanted me to go to Yale College and, you know, study to be something. And I had no idea in my mind what I wanted to be. I hated mathematics. I liked English. I liked history. But I didn't care too much for anything else, and I had no idea what I wanted to be. So I found a job just to get off the streets in those days for $3 a week to work on a vegetable truck from 3 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. And I did that for a little while, eating bananas along the way and everything else. And one day we passed by the post office, and I saw this sign, "Join the Navy, see the world." By golly. So surreptitiously I went there, and I was examined by this doctor over there, and he said, yeah. He said, "You're in pretty good shape. High school graduate?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Okay, I will put you on a waiting list." And so one day they called me, and I had to excuse myself from the vegetable truck man. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I got something very special." I went down, and I got into the Navy on another man's piles. The fella showed up with piles, and he couldn't pass the test, so I got into the Navy. And there it was. So I went home, and I said to my mother, "Guess what, Mom? I'm a G-man." "You're a what?" She was Italian and still spoke with that little accent. And I said, she says, "What do you mean, G-man?" I said, "I work for the government." She said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I joined the Navy." Well, you could read all her expectations written on her face were all gone. And she said, "Well, if that's the best you can do, So I joined the Navy. And my dad, I'll never forget the morning that I left. He'd been rather strict with me because he wanted me to be a good person. And he taught me the ways of life, in more ways than one, I'll tell you. But he sat by my bed and he said, "Son," he said, "you're going to make a lot of friends in the Navy. You'll see a lot of people. And as long as you have money in your pocket, you're going to be well liked." He said, "It's the time that you don't have any money in your pocket that you'll find who your friends really are," and left it at that. And he said, "Remember one thing, you will not be tied to your mother's apron strings anymore." What a lesson. Boy, I gulp a little bit on that one. But, so I served. And I served for 6 years and was discharged on September 1941 in Pearl Harbor. And there I was a gunner's mate. I had been a ship's cook, but I caught bronchitis and had to get back up on the deck again, so I became a gunner's mate, checking out all the guns aboard ship. And we found a very curious thing, that every day, sometime during the day, our airplanes would attack us. And we'd all have general quarters and run up there and everything else, it was just, the drill, just to pass away the time, but it was a little hot and anyway, we did it. And we forgot that there was a Sunday, and that's when the Japanese came, on a Sunday, when everybody was sleeping. Hey, we did it Monday through Saturday, but on Sunday, we slept. And they were the wise ones, and they gave it to us pretty good, which is almost like our 9/11 now. But, so I said, well, I had gone home to get a job in a factory, and I was doing something inspection work, and I was getting 50 cents an hour. And I was doing so much work, and the fellow said, "Why don't you go up and ask for a nickel raise, He said, "After all, you're a good worker and everything else." I said, "Okay." So I went up and asked the man for a nickel raise. "Are you trying to put us out of business?" I said, "But sir, it's only 55 cents an hour." He said, "We can't afford it. We can't afford it." Thankfully, December the 7th came along. And so I went home and started to put on my uniform. My mother says, wait, you gotta wait. You have to. I said, "Why, Mom? They're gonna call me." And she said, please wait until they call you, because I feel that you. Well, okay, Mom. So I went back to work, and I waited, and sure enough, the call came. I went home, put on my uniform, went over and got sworn in, and went back to the factory to get my pay. And who should be standing there but an old yeoman? We call them yeomen in the Navy, but they're like secretaries that have the little office doing all the typing work and everything else. And he was standing out there, and he said, where are you going? I said, I just rejoined the Navy. I'm going to war. He said, wait a minute. He says, you put 6 years in already. And he says, you got shore duty coming. Shore duty? At the beginning of a war? What is this? And he said, no. He says, you got 6 years of duty, so you put in for shore duty. Well, we put in for shore duty. And sure enough, they sent me to a ship that was one of 3 ships guarding the entire Atlantic coastline. We had no ships here in the East Coast. They were all out there, either dead or drowned in Pearl Harbor or San Diego, but that was about it. And this ship had been given to the Navy by old man Murphy, who made Murphy beds that came out of the wall, if you remember. And I had my own stateroom as a first-class gunner's mate. I mean, I deserved it. And the captain used to knock on my door because he didn't know any different, being a Yale graduate. And it was quite something until we started to go to sea, and then we had to pay for it. And one time we got this old skipper aboard who had been an old China skipper, and we got a submarine dead to rights. And we were standing out just like paper silhouettes out there, because all the lights were on from New York all the way down clean through to Florida and back up through to Maine. And it's a wonder to me that some submarine just didn't let us have it, but I guess they just didn't want to expend the torpedo. So off we sailed, and we were going along to chugga. And this one day we had an oiler that was assigned to us to take them down to Union City, and from Union City on down through. And so we chug along after them, guarding them. They were going faster than we could. And suddenly we picked up a submarine. And the skipper called me, and he said, Gunner, he said, I want you to set the depth charges at 75 feet. And when I blow the whistle, he says, you let that Y gun go, because we didn't go fast enough to let him go off the stern. So we blew him off with a Y gun. So the boom came the whistle, bam, off went the things, and everybody going, ah. They'd never heard a gun go off before. And I was kicking them in the behind, come on, load up, and I'm waiting for the detonation, no detonation. And again, we did it again and again and again. And one went off about a half hour later as we were circling around. We finally lost him. And I said, what have I done? I could see my carcass hanging up there in a yardarm. And the captain said, well, we'll have an investigation when we get back to port. Sure enough, we got back to port, and they started taking these things off. I said, wait a minute. You got fulminate of mercury in there, the whole bit? And they said, have you got a chip and hammer, Gunner? I said, yeah. So you got a chip and hammer, chipped away a little bit on the little plaque. And it said, manufactured in 1917. That's what we went to war with. However we won, I don't have any idea. But we had that band of brothers over there in Europe, thank God. And we had a great Navy behind us, and somehow or other we made it. And here I stand before you. After my mother said to me when I went home, and I was home for a couple of weeks, not doing anything. And one day she said, well, one of those nice wells, like a mother says, you going to get a job or what? And so I went looking for work. And I couldn't see myself back in those factories any longer. I mean, you're locked up like a like a prisoner for 10, 12 hours a day. And after being out in the open all my life, in the Navy and everything else, I just couldn't see it. So I'd take my lunch and I'd go to a movie or go to the park and feed the squirrels or do something. And one day I went home rather disgusted and disgruntled, and she looked at me. She said, "Ernie, what's the matter?" And I said, "Mom, for 2 cents I'll go back in the Navy and do my other 10 years and get a pension. At least I'll have something." And she looked at me and she said, "Have you ever thought of becoming an actor?" Says, "You always like to make a damn fool of yourself in front of people. Why don't you give it a try?" And so help me, I looked up and I saw that golden light open, that doors open and that golden light come down. And I said, "Mom, that's what I'm going to be." And 10 years later, I had an Academy Award. Would you believe it? Don't ask me how I did it. It was a lot of pounding and on the door and people saying no. And I remember one time I was walking along, again rather disgruntled, and saying to myself, "You dummy, why did you ever become an actor? This is the worst job you could ever possibly get into. I mean, what a profession. They want you only once a month because they don't want you to be seen too often on the screen. They think it's no good to be seen so often." This is a fact. And then, of course, there was a grocer up there in upstate New York who suddenly felt that all the communists in the world were in the business of being show business. And I just couldn't see it. He said, "If anybody hires these communists," he says, "we will not use their product." And so he wanted to know everybody whose name was on the list and everything else, and check out the name and everything. And I could just see my name up there, Ernest Borgnine. Gotta be communistic. Gotta be. And I always said this, that if the Russians ever did come, or China, I could always change it to Enengrab. Borgnine spelled backwards. What the devil? But one day, and I'm walking along, as I said, and suddenly I smelled that some vendor's selling hot chestnuts. And I went up to see this vendor because it reminded me of my mother when she used to take the chestnuts and cut them and put them on the stove, and the whole house would be permeated with that wonderful smell. And I went up, not to buy any, because I didn't have money to buy a chestnut, but just to smell. And I saw a sign on that vendor's cart that became my philosophy of life, and the title of my book, When It's Finished. And it read, "I don't want to set the world on fire, I just want to keep my nuts warm." Pardon me, ladies, but that's the truth. I have tried to follow that and be as good as I could to my fellow man. That's all. That's all I've tried to do. And be as good an actor as I possibly could to make my parents proud. My mother never saw me just one time on a stage. And I think that's what gave her the idea of my being an actor. My dad was the one that saw me receive the Academy Award. When I called him up, I said, "Hey, Pop, did you see it? How'd you like it?" He said, "You remember those guys that used to say, 'Tell him for God's sakes to get a job and settle down. What the hell do you think he's going to be an actor? What is this bit?'" He said, "They were the first ones through the door saying, 'We knew he could do it.'" That's Ernest Borgnine. I've been married a few times. One time for 32 days. It kind of set a record, didn't it? She was a wonderful lady, but it just didn't work because everybody recognized me, but nobody recognized her. She had been a very famous artist on the stage, doing musicals and everything else. Ethel Merman was her name. And we went on a honeymoon from Los Angeles to Hawaii to Kyoto and all that, Japan, and everybody recognized me, but nobody knew her from Adam. And she became angrier and angrier, and I wondered why. What is wrong here? What am I doing? I don't know. And when we got back, we went to a party, and she said this and that and the other thing, and hey, what can you do in 32 days? Can I be that bad? Anyway, we got divorced. And she wrote a book later on, and I finally made the book. And what it was she got to my name. It said Ernest Borgnine at the top of the page, and a blank page. So I thank her for that. And so I'm very, very happily married today for 32 years to a wonderful, wonderful lady that people even name their babies after her now. Her name is Tova, and she's from Norway, and one of the grandest ladies, most beautiful lady I've ever seen. And I've been very, very happily married to her, and it's a joy, really, although she says, Ernie, we've been married 32 years. I said, no, we've only been married half that time. She said, what do you mean? I said, because we only see each other half the time. She's always away she sold a company that she just started to QVC, and now she's become the spokeslady for her product. And she does very well at it. Golly, when you really come down to it, in 2 hours' time to sell something well over $2 million worth of product in 2 hours' time, it's not too bad. So that's what she does. And here you see a very happy man with a wonderful thing from the Vets Administration today, and being honored by you distinguished people. I am very, very honored. I thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Did you want to ask a question? Oh, did you want to ask a question? Okay.
We have quite a few questions for you, Mr. Borgnine, and the first one is, what personal qualities of character do you credit to your success? What advice do you have for young people just starting off in the real world?
First of all, go to school. Secondly, study. I always said, boy, I'm through school, but I'm still studying. Every script that I get is another challenge, another way to look at life, another way to see life, and bring it to life. And this is that you never stop studying, never. And it's something that you should never stop doing. And observe your fellow man, and keep both feet on the ground. Believe me, that's the best way. Don't ever get this high, never. Doesn't pay. And I've seen it pay. I've seen it happen that way, where one day, you're a so-called star, and the next day you're wondering where all your friends were. It's a fact.
Sort of like being a press club president, huh?
That's the way it is.
Next question. How did you handle Betty Davis in your film together?
Are you kidding? She was the most wonderful gal in the world. I'll never forget, while I was in the service, I had sent away for a picture from Betty Davis, and I signed it Duke. And when very first day I saw her and we went to work, I said, I have a picture that you signed for me while I was in the service. She said, really? And I said, yeah, you signed it to Duke. She said, why Duke? She said, well, my mother was the daughter of a count. my grandfather had been a Count Borzelli, who had been a financial advisor to Victor Emmanuel the King, and so he lived rather sumptuously and all that sort of bit. Anyway, that's another story. But where were we now?
How did you handle Betty Davis?
Oh, how did I handle Betty Davis? So this one morning, the first morning of work, we had a fellow called Richard Brooks who ate actors alive. And, well, I must tell you this story. We were having a little difficulty with this very first scene where my daughter comes in a picture called Catered Affair. And the daughter comes in and she says, "Mom, I'm going to get married." Well, that tore open everything. I was trying to save to buy a taxi, and she's going to spend it all on her daughter's wedding, because she never had a wedding. So there was something that was happening, and it just didn't come out right in the scene. And Richard Brooks said, "All right," he said, "keep working on this damn scene." He said, "I've got to go behind the camera for a minute." And he said, maybe we'll straighten it out later. "All right, sir." And I looked at Miss Davis, and I said, "Ma'am," I said, "if you don't mind, I think I know what's wrong." She said, "What is it?" I said, "It's a matter of timing." "Well, let's try it." We tried it, and sure enough, there it was. So he came back and he said, "All right, let's work on this damn scene." Richard, you weren't watching. And he said, "Why? What's the matter?" He said, "Well, Ernie Borgnine here just figured it out." And he looked at me. Said, "Goddamn thinking actors." I said, "Oh, brother." And now we've had it. So we just shot the scene, boom, bam, bim. Everything's fine. Now we go on to the next set, where I'm supposed to be getting into bed after driving my taxi all night long. And I'm on one side of the bed, and Betty and she is standing over there, and everyone around, he had called everyone. "Get over here, drop your racing sheets, get over here." Okay, quiet. And now he looked around and he looked at me and he said, "Now, Mr. Borgnine, what have you got in mind for this scene?" And I don't know how it came out, but I said, "Sir, did you ever hear that wonderful story about this drummer boy down south who was dragging along his goods all day? He didn't have a car, didn't have a cart or anything, and he's just dragging along and he's selling his things to the farmers, and he was exhausted at the end of the day. And he stopped by this one farmer. He says, "Please, can I sleep in your barn tonight?" "No, no, no," he says, "you're going to have dinner with us, and you'll sleep with my little boy. He's got a great big bed. Don't worry about it." "Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you very much." They were all listening. And now the man ate, and he went right up to bed. Pretty soon the little boy came up there, and he got down on his side of the bed and bowed his head. The fella cocked open one eye and he said, "Gee, look at that. I haven't done that in years." So he got down on his side of the bed and bowed his head. The little boy looked up and he said, "Mister, what you doing?" He said, "I'm doing the same thing you are, son." He said, "Mom going to be awful mad. The pot's on this side." He never bothered me again.
I'm going to leave that alone. Your career has spanned more than 50 years, so you've seen enormous change in Hollywood. What's changed for the better, and what has changed for the worse?
Now, what is this? Your career has spanned
50 years.
More than 50 years, yeah?
So you've seen enormous change in Hollywood, and what's changed for the better, and what has changed for the worse?
You know, I'll tell you. In my early life in motion pictures, we had people like Harry Cohn, Sam Goldwyn, people at 20th Century Fox, all people who had come from different walks of life and had gotten into this business of making motion pictures. And somehow or other, they could sense the pulse of the people. It was marvelous. And they put people under contract, as they wanted me to do. And after my first picture at Columbia, they wanted to put me under contract. And Harry Cohn came up to me and said, we're going to give you $150 a week. And he said, and You know, you can get started right now. And I said, sir, I can't. I said, my wife, she's attached to her mother and father, and she wants to be in New York with her mother and father. He said, what is she, Jewish? And I said, yes, she is. He said, goddamn Jews are all alike. You always want to stay with each other. And I said, well, I'm sorry, sir, you know. Well, these are the kind of people that made those studios. And they made good pictures. And I always blame Clark Gable, of all people. When he said, madam, I don't give a damn, he opened the floodgates. And everybody said, here we go, boys. And today you hear nothing but expletives all over the place. And I just won't make those kind of pictures. I'm sorry. I don't. No, please. No, I don't feel like I should leave a legacy of dirty words to children who probably know far more than I do. But I don't want to do it. And that's the change that I've seen. There is no respect anymore in making pictures. They respect me all right, you know, and people, the older people can walk on for a moment, you know, but they've all got blinders on, and they forget, you know, and I'm a star. There it is.
This questioner says, how did you get into TV's McHale Navy? Tell the candy bar story?
Somebody knows me real well, huh? Peter? I had just come back from Italy after making some pictures over there. My agent called and said, listen, Ernie, he said, we got a thing over here called McHale's Navy. I said, oh? He said, it's all about PT boats, and I know you like the water, and I know you're crazy for this and that. And said, would you like to play the part of this man? You're the star of Quentin McHale. And he explained it pretty well, and I said, well, I'll tell you, no. You know, I've done an awful lot of television in my time. And I said, no, I'm a motion picture actor now. So I think I'll stick with motion pictures. Well, if you change your mind, please call me, because we're rather desperate about getting everything all settled. And okay. The next morning, as the good Lord would have it, came a knock on the door. Some young man selling chocolate bars for a private school out in the valley of San Fernando. And he said, would you like? Sure. So I bought some, and he looked at me and said, mister, so you look awfully familiar. What's your name? I said, my name is James Arness. He said, no, he does Gunsmoke. I said, no, my name is really Richard Boone, pulling his leg, you know. He said, no, he does Have Gun Will Travel. I said, son of a gun, you know, all I got to do is, he sees the Oscar over there and everything else. I'll tell him my name now, he'll know me. So I said, no, my name is really Ernest Borgnine. Absolutely nothing. But nothing. And so I gave him his money and sent him on his way, called my agent, and I said, that part's still open? And he said, yes. I said, good, I'll do it. He said, what changed your mind? I said, none of your damn business.
So from McHale's Navy to this questioner who asked, how did you become involved in the Spongebob show?
You didn't know that, did you? You didn't know that I did Spongebob. Well, I'll tell you, we do it for money. It's that simple. It's like stealing money, and so they called me up and they said that we'd like to hear your voice, and I went over there and I said, hey, you know. And you know, after winning an Academy Award and after getting all kinds of plaudits and everything else, it's the most amazing thing when children come up and say, you're what character? I've forgotten the character I play, but you're so-and-so. Yes, that's me. Oh, well, show us what you do. And I said, evil! Oh my God, it's him! And suddenly I become a big hero, believe it or not.
Do you have fond memories of the Barter Theater? Did you ever visit Washington when you were there?
As a matter of fact, yes, we did come to Washington to stay. The Barter Theater, pardon me, I went down there just on the spur of the moment because I'd wanted to just quit this business after being in it 3 months. And I had played in 2 plays in one night at this little school that I went to in Hartford, Connecticut. And I got the first good reviews ever given an actor in 14 years in Hartford, Connecticut, and I said, I quit. This is worse than the Navy ever thought of being. But this teacher looked at me, she said, how dare you? You have so much to offer and everything. I said, what do you mean? She said, you have a lot to offer to people, to the public. And I said, I just scoffed at it. But this fellow, a friend of mine, said, listen, I'm leaving for a place called the Barter Theater of Virginia. Why don't you come down with me? And if you like it, fine. If you don't, forget it and go back and find a job. So we went. And we waited, and finally this man showed up. And he looked at me and he said, what do you do? I said, I'm an actor. He said, well, I'm up to here in actors, but if you're willing to work, he said, I'll put you to work and give you room and board. I said, okay. So I worked. I'll never forget the first day I was scrubbing what they call flats. It's the scenery, and scrubbing the paint off there so you can use it for something else. And I'm working alongside of a man called George Burns. That was his name, but he had to change his name because there was a George Burns in Hollywood. And so he became Bart Burns, Barter Theater, Bart Burns. And Bart and I were standing there looking at each other, and he was wearing the jacket of a Marine captain, having served in World War II. Well, we worked, and we worked, and we worked, and we worked. And it was the very first year of going out on the road. And they invited me to go along because I worked exceptionally hard, I suppose, and they were glad to have another strong back and a weak mind. So off we went. And that's how I made it up to Washington and got mugged on the very first night that I was here. I was going over there to a place where they used to buy these little hamburgers. What is it, White House hamburgers? Yeah. I was going up for a hamburger, and 2 of these girls tried to mug me, and I screamed like, well, that's enough of that.
How did your scripts end up at the University of North Alabama?
I have a buddy, his name is George Lindsay, and you probably know George as Goober. And old Goober and I, we met one day when I was rather despondent and going through another divorce. And we went out together, and we took a ride. And 8 hours later, we were still together, having played golf, having watched the farmers grow parsley, have done a million things together, and we went home. I went home like I had been in therapy. It was just brand new. I was laughing, and I was having fun. And we kept it that way all our lives, and we still do it, although he lives in Nashville. But it's just, if you can do it, believe me, it's the most wonderful therapy in the world to forget everything else and go out and see the splendors of the world and Mother Nature and everything else. You can't miss. You'll go home refreshed and worried, no worries at all. Believe me, it's marvelous. Anyway, to get back to this, he had been a graduate of the University of North Alabama, and he had his the first year of having all his films shown, which were all television shows and everything else. And the next year he promised me, he said, you're going to come down, he said, because we're going to have a festival in your honor. I said, okay, what the heck, what are you going to do? And I got to please him and make him happy. Well, I went down there, and I had visions because I had been naturally from New Haven, Connecticut, and Yale University, and everything else. I was going to leave my scripts to Yale. And when I got down there, and I saw the enthusiasm of these people, so wonderful, I said, you know something? I'm going to donate all my scripts with all my handwriting in it and everything else and notes to this University of North Alabama, where I know they will not be thrown into a corner, but will be used properly the way they should be. And so they made me a doctor. And I'm now, believe it or not, I'm up to doctor. And having received doctorates from about 4 different places already. But I've never seen anybody so wonderful as I have in University of North Alabama. God bless them.
I know you've talked quite extensively about your veteran experience, but this person asked, you have had a long history of using your celebrity status to help veterans. Why?
Why not? I find, I take it upon myself. Yesterday, for the first time, or second time, I went to this wonderful World War II memorial. And I had been there just before it opened, and we walked around in the mud, Paul Haley and I, and this fellow saw us walking around. He said, you're not supposed to be here. And suddenly he recognized me. He said, but if you want to see it, come on out. So we went, and he showed us everything. And so this time I came back, and I said, I'd like to go back to this old war memorial and to take a look now that it's finished. And to me, at one time, I wouldn't even get up for a dance. I wouldn't go. I was a wallflower. Believe it or not, I was a wallflower. I was afraid to ask any questions, afraid to step on anybody's toes. But today, it's changed, I guess, because I'm a little older and a little wiser maybe. But I go to all these people who are over there, and I said, World War II? Yep. Hey, man. And so we started swapping stories. And we took more pictures yesterday, and you shake a stick at. And the one thing that came up, there was some West Point cadets up there. And Paul Haley asked one of the cadets, he said, do you know this gentleman? No, we don't. No, sorry. Well, do you know so-and-so and so picture? Yes. Well, he was in it. Oh, really? Oh. That's it. But the older people, that's what it's all about. And so you go over there and you make them a little happy. That's what it's all about. The young people are happy anyway. But the older people, that's what counts. And I make it a point to visit, whether they're veterans or not, or just wonderful young ladies. They're older ladies, but to me they're always young, because, to make a person happy is a great thing in life. That's what counts. You can make my mother told me one time, and this is the God's honest truth, if you can make one person happy in a span of 24 hours, you've accomplished a great deal. C'est la vie.
What was it like flying with the Blue Angels?
Should I tell them the story? Well, I had done a little thing for them on board a ship, narrated something for them, and so they never forgot it, and they made me one of their honorary skippers. And so one day I'm making a picture in Alabama, and I said, listen, I'd like to come down to Pensacola and fly around with you boys for a minute. Oh, please, Skipper, come on down. So I went down, Immediately, they put me into a suit, put me into this airplane. This young pilot said to me, he said, now, Mr. Borgnine, we're going to fly straight down this thing, and then we're going to go straight up, and you look over your shoulder, and you can see all of Pensacola. Really? Oh, that's wonderful. Off we went. Boom! Shoom! And my head went right down to my tailbone. I couldn't move my head for 2 months. And oh, that was nothing. We're going along there, having a ball, you know, and suddenly he called up one of the aircraft carriers that was working out there, having maneuvers, landing maneuvers. And he said, I'd like a VIP aboard. I've got a VIP aboard. Would you like, you know, we'd like to make a pass. Who is it? I told him. Oh, give us about 10 minutes. Okay. Well, 10 minutes passed, and they said, come on by. And we went by. And I'll never forget this. I get a lump in my throat. All hands were up there waving.
That was a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing some of your fond memories and helping to refresh ours that you've given to us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to present to you for being here this certificate of appreciation from the National Press Club. It's our great honor to have you here. Thank you very much. And I would also like to present to you the much coveted National Press Club mug.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Needless to say, I'm honored. I'm truly honored. And I respect you all, and I know the work that you do, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but you have to do it. And, hey, somebody's got to do it, right? But I respect you, and I thank you very, very much for the great honor of having me here. And you too, Mr. Cosgrove. Where are you? Oh, here he is, over here. God bless you. And again, my respects to you, Admiral Johnson. Absolutely. The CEO of the National, of the, Navy Memorial. I'll get it right. At 87, you know, you forget a little. And if you've never been down to the Navy Memorial, please, I beg of you to go down there. You see America at work right there, the Navy at work. It is just absolutely marvelous. And if you're not doing anything on Saturday evening, I believe it starts at 8:15, they open the doors? 7:15. Captain Gambone and I are going to attempt. He won't. I mean, he knows what it's going to be. I will attempt to narrate a thing about D-Day with the accompaniment of the wonderful, wonderful naval band, the U.S. Navy Band. And it's a treat, believe me. It's the second time I'm going to be doing it. The first one we did for Midway Island, the Battle of Midway, and this one is for the D-Day, the 60th anniversary of D-Day, which is also celebrating the 289th birthday of the United States Navy. Isn't that wonderful? God bless. Thank you again. God bless all of you, and I love you all.
Thank you, Mr. Borgnine, for coming and speaking with us today. And also, I would like to say, please send our kind regards to your beautiful wife, Tova, and thank her on behalf of the National Press Club for her generosity in presenting to our audience today a gift of her fabulous perfume. I would also like to thank National Press Club staff members Melinda Cook, Pat Nelson, Joanne Booz, Melanie Abdo and Howard Rothman for organizing today's lunch, and thanks to the National Press Club Library for their research. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.